Good morning, everyone. It's 10 o'clock, so I think we'll start. My name is Richard Strivens, and I'm going to chair this session. And we have one presentation online, and then we have a lecture recital afterwards. So I'll introduce each in turn. So for the first lecture recital, the online presentation is called The Afterlife of a Voice, Sarah Bernhardt through Mary Marquet. And this is given by Hippolyte Broud, who is an artist, voice, pedagogue, and researcher, trained in classics at University College London and in devised theatre and voice pedagogy at the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama. He is currently completing a practice-based PhD in voice studies at the University of Exeter. He teaches voice and speech at the Cours Cochet de la Veine in Paris and has been invited to teach at La Manufacture in Lausanne and CNSAD in Paris. Voice coach work notably includes Prends Soin by Alexander Zeldin and Adolescence et Territoire, directed by Kenza Bernhardt. Would you welcome, even though it's from online, Hippolyte?
A voice speaks. Then, a few decades later, another voice speaks after it. Not exactly, not word for word, not sound for sound. Yet, something seems to persist. A rhythm, an accent, a way of lingering a vowel, a way of carrying a phrase through time. The first voice belongs to Sarrade Bernhardt, already legendary during her own lifetime. It traveled across Europe and North America, moving from stage to photograph, from photograph to record, and from record to archive. More than a century later, performers, historians, and researchers continue to return to it. The second voice belongs to Marquet, born in 1985 and died in 1979. Marquet became one of the leading actresses of the Comédie Française during the first half of the 20th century. Unlike us, she did not encounter Bernhardt through traces. She acted alongside her. The voice that reaches us today as an archive was, for Marquet, part of everyday theatrical life. Throughout her career, Bernhardt remained a recurring point of reference. At times, Marquet spoke about her, at times she imitated her, and occasionally the two gestures became indistinguishable. During the final decade of her life, she became particularly known for evoking Bernhardt in poetry recitals and public performances, and she continued to give these throughout the 60s and the 70s. The recordings I discuss today emerge from precisely this period. What interests me in this case is that it allows us to observe a phenomenon that remains central to theatrical practice. Voices act upon other voices. Performers carry traces of teachers, directors, partners, and previous performances. Vocal organization evolve while remaining recognizably their own. As a voice teacher, a voice coach, and a researcher, I encounter this constantly. In rehearsals, in actor training, I refer to this process as vocal organization, a term I will unpack more precisely throughout this presentation. Listening to Marie Marquet, I found myself confronting the same phenomenon on a much larger time scale than on my own. Not across a rehearsal process or a single production, but across an entire artistic life. This led me to the following question. If voice continually act upon one another, what remains active from Sarrade Bernhardt's voice within Marie Marquet's later performances? To explore this question, I have selected a corpus of 3 recordings. The first is a surviving recording of Sarrade Bernhardt herself, performing Racine Phèdre, and used here as a point of reference. The other two made near the end of Marie Marquet's life in the 70s. The two recordings I examine today emerged from quite different situations. One was made for television program devoted to the great actors and actresses of the early 20th century. While discussing the French writer Eugène Morand, Marquet makes a striking remark. To speak Morand properly, she explains, one must imitate Sarah Bernhardt. And then she does it. As she begins, the recording itself changes. A reverberation is introduced, the voice acquires an almost spectral quality. Memory, performance, and technology briefly converge into a singular combination. The second recording comes from a theatre class led in Paris by the actor and teacher Jean Darnel. Here again, Bernhardt becomes a point of reference. The vocabulary, however, has shifted. Marquet no longer speaks of imitation. Instead, she explained that she enters Bernhardt's wake. She used the word in French, son sillage. Taken together, they allow us to examine how Bernhardt's voice remains active within Marquet's own vocal practice, and how a theatrical voice may continue to operate, transform, and reconfigure itself across two generations of performers. So before turning to Marquet, I would like to hear Sarah Bernhardt herself.
Et sur quoi jugez-vous que je perds la mémoire sointe? Aurais-je perdu tout soin de ma gloire?
Madame, pardonnez, j'avoue en rougissant que j'accusais à tort un langage innocent. Ma honte ne peut plus soutenir votre vue et je vais...
Oh, cruel! Tu m'as trop entendu. Je t'en ai décaché pour te tirer d'erreur. Eh bien, connais donc Phèdre et toute sa fureur. J'aime. Ne pense pas qu'au moment que saigne innocente à mes yeux, je m'approuve moi-même, ni que du fol amour qui trouble ma raison, ma lâche complaisante et nourrit poison. Objet infortuné, j'ai vengeance céleste. Je m'abhorre encore plus que tu ne me détestes. Les dieux m'en sont témoins. Ces dieux qui dans mon plan ont allumé ce feu fatal à tout mon sang. Ces dieux qui se sont fait une gloire cruelle de séduire le cœur d'une faible mortelle. Toi-même, en ton esprit, rappelle le passé. C'est peu de savoir qui cruel je vais chasser.
Today, historians have learned a great deal from recordings such as this one. Julia Gros de Gasquet has shown what they reveal about end of the 19th century declamation and the speaking of Alexandrin. Marie-Madeleine Mervonroux has explored the technical and historical conditions that made such recording possible. And more recently, Anne Pellois and Thomas Gonzalez have asked what it means to reactivate Sarah Bernhardt's voice through contemporary artistic practice. These studies have profoundly enriched our understanding of Sarah Bernhardt. My own interest lies slightly elsewhere. As a voice coach and a researcher, I find myself listening less for what this recording tells us about the past than for what might remain active within it. Certain features are immediately recognizable. The nasal resonance, the forward placement, the brightness of the tone. Particularly striking is the way some phrases seem to descend without ever fully settling. The pitch falls, yet the resonance remains projected forward, creating the impression that the voice continues moving even as through reaches its conclusion. Many commentators have already discussed these specific characteristics. What draws my attention, however, is something slightly different, a way of organizing speech. The phrase advances through a succession of lightly supported syllables. Rather than concentrating energy on a few dominant stresses, Bernhardt appeared to distribute vocal effort across the entire line. The result is a remarkably mobile respiratory organization. The voice seems carried by a continuous underlying support. Breath is released sparingly. Energy circulates through the phrase. Even when the pitch falls, a sentence appears to conclude the underlying propulsion, rarely disappears entirely. Some are gently reinforced, and others are barely touched before the phrase moves forward again. The vowel seems to play a crucial role in this organization. They function less as point of arrival than as transition, carrying momentum on different scales, from one syllable to the next, from one word to the next, from one image to the next. As a listener, one is not simply following information, one is following the movement of attention created by the voice. I am not suggesting that these features belong exclusively to Bernhardt, nor that they define entirely our practice. What interests me is that they appear to function as structuring principles. They organize the listener experience of theatrical time, and they seem to provide the dynamic framework through which Bernhardt's interpretation unfolds. For me, these observations provide a useful listening framework for approaching Marie Marquet also. Keeping this tendency in mind, let us now return to Marquet and ask what becomes audible when another performer carries someone similar parameters through time. The first recordings come from the television program devoted to great actors and actresses of the early 20th century. In this program, Marquet recalls Les Cathédrales by Eugène Morand, a play in which she had performed alongside Sarah Bernhardt many decades earlier. At one point, she makes a striking remark. To speak Morand properly, she explains, one must imitate Sarah Bernhardt. And then she does it.
Il le fallait peut-être, mères au cœur atrocement meurtri, pour des héros futurs qu'ils vous fussent repris, ces enfants dont la mort vous a fait des ancêtres. Nos fils morts sont les vrais, les uniques vivants. Et il se peut qu'un jour, à l'heure où le soir tombe, le voyageur errant qu'arrêteront cette ombre ne compare, égaré en rêve décevant, notre vie aussi basse et leur mort aussi grande, et reprenant sa route indignée, ne demande pourquoi les morts ont-ils enterré les vivants.
Listening to this passage, what strikes me is not the degree of resemblance. The voice remains unmistakably Marquet. The resonance is less nasal than Sarah Bernhardt, the vocal production is more chest-centered, the stresses are generally firmer, the articulation is more explicit. Yet, certain features associated with Bernhardt remain perceptible. A flexibility in the treatment of the final stress, a tendency to distribute vocal energy across the phrase rather than concentrating it on a few dominant stresses. And at moments, the distinctly interior articulation of certain consonants, T and D, particularly, often remarked upon in Bernhardt's speech. What I would like to focus on, however, is less the survival of these individual features than what they reveal about Marquet's memories of Sarah Bernhardt. As said before, Marquet did not encounter Bernhardt through recordings or archive. She encountered her through her years of theatrical contact. The transmission at work here, therefore, begins long before the recording itself. What reaches us through television has already passed through memory, bodily experience, and decades of theatrical practice. Listening to the recording, I am struck by what Marie Marquet chose to preserve. Not even Bernhardt's voice as an object, but a way of organizing attention through language. In this sense, the recording tells us as much about Marquet as it does about Bernhardt. Every act of remembering is also an act of selection. The Bernhardt that returns here is the Bernhardt that remained active within Marquet's own practice. This may explain why she immediately frames Bernhardt as a practical resource rather than a historical monument. To speak Morand properly, she explains again, one must imitate her. The remark is revealing. Marquet invokes Bernhardt as a way into the text, as a solution to practical problem of performance. What the recording preserves then is not simply the memory of a voice, it preserves a conception of acting. The television program reinforces this impression. As Marquet begins her imitation, a reverberation is introduced. At first, the effect appears almost spectral. Yet, it also evokes the shared theatrical world of the play Les Cathédrales. The program briefly reconstructs a memory of performance rather than merely presenting historical document. The third recording comes from a theatre class led in Paris by the actor and teacher Jean Darnel. Marquet is speaking to a group of young actors. At one point, she reflects on Sarah Bernhardt's performance in Racine's Athalie and offered a striking formulation. She explains that she entered Bernhardt's wake. The choice of word is revealing. The extract from Athalie, account of a dream. The queen is no longer arguing or commanding, she is trying to give a form to a vision.
Le fier Jéhu tremble dans sa marie. De toutes parts, pressé par un puissant voisin que j'ai su soulever contre cet assassin, il me laisse en ces lieux souveraine maîtresse. Je jouissais en paix du fruit de ma sagesse. Mais un trouble important vient depuis quelques jours de mes prospérités interrompre le cours. Un songe. Devrais-je inquiéter d'un songe? Entretient dans mon cœur un chagrin qui le ronge, je l'évite partout, partout. Il me poursuit. C'était pendant l'horreur d'une profonde nuit. Ma mère, Jézabel, devant moi, s'est dressée comme au jour de sa mort, pompeusement parue. Ces malheurs n'avaient point abattu sa fierté. Même elle avait encore cet accent emprunté dont elle eut soin de peindre et d'orner son visage pour réparer des ans l'irréparable outrage.
I find Marquet's image of the wake particularly useful here. A wake does not solely imply resemblance. It describes a movement that continues while changing form. Something similar seems to occur within the recording itself. The opening sounds unmistakably like Marquet. The chest-centered resonance remain, the firmest trace remain, the more explicit articulation remain also. Yet, as Athalie enters the dream, something gradually shifts. The listener is suddenly carried less by the logic of an argument than by the unfolding movement of images. Listening to this passage, I find myself returning to several of the tendencies identified earlier in Bernhardt's recording, particularly the alteration of the breathing structure, from linearity and very detoured stresses to constantly stressed breath. This is why Marquet's image of the wake feels so precise. In my current PhD research, I have developed a similar phenomenon through the notion of distortion as translation. Translation does not support a form intact from one context to another, it carries something across through transformation. What remains active from Bernhardt is therefore a way of organizing attention, a way of carrying speech through time. What we hear in Athalie is a distortion of Marquet as a source and a translation as a continuation of Bernhardt's heritage. The relationship between Bernhardt and Marquet complicates our understanding of theatrical transmission. The recording suggests that certain dimensions of performance do not circulate primarily through the applications of norms, linguistic, social, aesthetic through declamation rules, for example, but through the gradual organization of one performer's practice by another. Marquet's testimony is valuable because it makes this process momentarily visible. It's the persistence of a relationship, a relationship that continues to shape her work decades after her encounter with Bernhardt. For me, this raises a broader question. What kind of theatrical knowledge are carried within voice themselves? Not only within what they say, but within how they organize breath, attention, rhythm, imagery, thoughts. And how do such forms of knowledge travel across time? The recording discussed today suggests one possible answer. They do not survive as stable objects, they survive through transformation, through what I call distortion as translation, and through what Marquet calls awake. This is perhaps why I find this case so compelling. It invites us to think of the archive not simply as a repository of past performances, but as a record of unfinished transformation. Not as a place where voices are preserved and acting gestures are preserved, but as a place where relationships between voice remain active and can be prolonged, a place where one performer can still, decades later, continue to shape the work of another. Thank you.
Will Hippolyte be available for?
Yes,
Yeah,
later.
Okay, good, yeah. As we've been doing through the whole 3 days, we will move to the second presentation, and then we'll have 5 minutes for discussion, and then after that, Hippolyte will be online, and Karine will be here. So now it's for me to introduce Karine. Karine Leblanc Sarrade is a professional Odissi dance theatre artist and associate researcher at the Scène du Monde Création Savoir Critique Laboratory, Université Paris 8. She holds a PhD in aesthetics of the arts, specializing in theatre and dance. Her 2023 thesis explores Odissi aesthetics as identity issues in contemporary post-colonial India. Her working methods combine participant observation and practice-based research. Recent lecture demonstrations include creation processes in Odissi at Université Paul Valéry, Montpellier, and Université Paris 8. She is also a volunteer for the Center for Peace and Performing Arts. Please welcome Karine. That this is a 30-minute lecture recital.
Thank you very much. So let's start. In Odissi, a dance theatre from the state of Odisha in India, an entire section of the repertoire is a harmonious polyphony between the song's lyrics and their associated bodily movements and gestures. In narrative pieces, the dancer not only illustrates the poetic words through her body, but as lines are repeated several times, she also goes beyond them. She shows choreographic variations known as Sancaris. The Sancaris develop what is implicit in the text as it is understood by the choreographer. Thus, the gestures become a superimposed voice to the song, propelling the narration forward. And the question is, how is the use of Sancaris in choreographic composition not a mere gestural transposition of the song, but an artistic vision? I will start my lecture demonstration by analyzing the polysemy of the Sanskrit word Sancari and see how its various meanings shed light on their functions. Then, via the analysis and demonstrations of items by Guru Aruna Mohanty on the heroine Radha, I will try to prove the Sancaris are dialogic, being the product of the choreographer's work on the song and research on the character. Eventually, I will bring the case study of the item Kohibaku Laja by Guru Aruna Mohanty to show how the Sancaris convey what the words cannot, namely the eroticism in the relationship between Radha and Krishna in the village of Vrindavan. So Radha is the female character and Krishna is the male one. Now, like all other classical dance theatre forms of India, Odissi seeks to convey the experience of rasa. Professor Katia Legeret, a dance theatre specialist, defines rasa as the sentiment experienced by the spectator who reaches a state of inner serenity through empathy with the dancer's refined bodily techniques linked to the poetry of the song. And indeed, the ultimate goal of the artist on stage is to lead the spectator into the savoring of rasa, into a stable emotional state. This takes place through the use of the Sancaris. In the translations of this word, one cannot but notice a paradox between the stability of the aimed rasa and the instability of the Sancaris. In fact, the term derives from the noun sancharidva. English equivalents include inconstancy or transitoriness. Its form sancharin could mean air or wind. As an adjective, sancharita can translate as driven, communicated, transmitted, set in motion. So it is always the idea of communication through transitory movement. And similarly, a choreography unfolding on stage resonates with the sensitive spectator, triggering physical and emotional reactions like goosebumps, tears, laughter, that is to say, inner and outer stirrings. Furthermore, the very word Sanchari Bhava, or transitory feelings, appears in the Natya Shastra. The Natya Shastra, that's the ancient treatise codifying the techniques of the Indian performing arts. So there, in the book, the 33 Sanchari Bhavas are types of mental states. According to, again, Katia Legeret, the function of these states is to introduce diversity and modulation into the permanent sentiment chosen for a dramatic composition. So the permanent sentiment, the rasa, could be love, fear, compassion, among others. In the same vein, the dance theatre specialist Kapila Vatsyayan writes that, and I quote, portraying the various Sanchari Bhavas is done through a series of variations in which each word of the poetry is interpreted in as many different ways as possible, the dancer giving a visual presentation of the poem which is sung. Now, in the everyday language used among artists, the Sancharis are, as explained to me by my dance teachers, lines repeated several times, each interpreted differently by the dancer's gestures. This practical definition suggests that the gestures are a voice added to the song to turn it into a visual poem. Hence, one of the most common uses of the Sancharis is to visually establish the setting and also the characters and the motives. To achieve this, the choreographer can decide how many times a line is repeated. For example, in the musical introduction of the item Naika by Guru Gangadhar Pradhan, the dancer depicts a character cheerfully gathering flowers. But then the song starts, and for 84 seconds, only 2 lines repeat, and they are in Odia language. Sakhi Gomora Kunjaku Aja Asibe Pora Senagara Raja. Here, the dancer embodies the heroine, Radha, telling her friend, Sakhi, if I close the lines written in Odia language, Sakhi, my lover Krishna will visit me in the grove. To an Odia-speaking audience, the mention of Sakhi, the friend, and Krishna, the lover, immediately identifies Radha as the heroine, so the gestures do not need to establish that. It's obvious. The Sancharis instead explain why Radha has happily decorated the grove, the kunja. So first, Radha acknowledges the presence of a friend on the first 2 Sakhigo. I don't need to play anything now. Sakhigo, oh, you're here. Sakhigo, look at me. And then on Kunjaku Aja, she will show the kunja, the grove. Kunjaku Aja, and again, Kunjaku Aja. And then on the repeated Asibe Porase, Radha shows Krishna with his flute and peacock feather entering the kunja, and initiating with her a game of seduction, holding her wrists. And then again on kunja kuaja, she shows the hidden kunja. So the scene is set. Everything will happen in the frame of the kunja, and Radha's joy is explained by her anticipated union with her lover. In this example, the gestures remain close to the text since the lines are quite factual. But the Sancaris can also serve as a space for the choreographer's interpretive vision, particularly when the poetic text provides a limited contextual detail. In Madhave, a composition by Guru Aruna Mohanty, Radha is angry with the unfaithful Krishna and she refuses to meet him. The whole item depicts Sakhi, the friend, reminding Radha of Krishna's efforts at reconciliation. Multiplying her example, Sakhi becomes engrossed in thoughts of Krishna herself. Spotting him by the river, she urges Radha no fewer than 9 times, Harim Avalokaya, means look at Hari. And Hari is the divine form of Krishna linked to the god Vishnu. So it is Sakhi who truly sees Krishna as his divine self revealed through the 10 avatars or incarnations. Even if the avatars are never mentioned in the song, the dancer pictures Sakhi mirroring all of them in a growing intensity of devotion. Can we play the music? Madhave.
हरिमिव लोकय सफलय नयने हरिमिव लोकय सफलय नयने हरिमिव लोकय 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 सफलय नयने हरिमिव लोकय सफलय नयने माधवे.
Thanks a lot. So here, Aruna Mohanty, the choreographer, uses the Sancaris to highlight Krishna's divine nature, drawing, I think, on a shared cultural knowledge between herself and her Hindu audience, who knows about the avatars. And I think it's implicit polyphony. Through the Sancaris, Sakhi contemplates Krishna's divine nature, just as the audience does. Now, as in Odissi, the main rasa is Sringara, the stable sentiment of love or eroticism. Radha is central. But surprisingly, and unlike other recurrent characters in the repertoire, she cannot be identified through a single gesture. For example, Krishna has got his flute or a peacock feather. The god Shiva can be identified with his damaru, a small percussion instrument, or snakes. The elephant god Ganesha has got his ears or tusks. But by contrast, all the gestures associated to Radha could fit any graceful female character, holding her veil, or picking flowers, or carrying water. So, Radha's singularity needs to be explored in the many aspects of her relationship with Krishna. Aruna Mohanty told me, since I have not seen Radha, I try to read different books written by different people, poets, and I try to see, through their eyes, through their words, the perceptions of Radha. So, when I get 10 perceptions of Radha, and I see the commonality, that Radha is like this, the mannerism, the behavior, the way she carries herself, how she communicates, on the basis of that, I give the steps, the movements, the graceful walk, and the way she's arranging flowers. Here, Aruna Mohanty reveals the intertextual core of her work, the voices of the many poets who wrote about Radha are woven into her own choreographic voice, and both speak through the Sancharis. In the item Bajuchi Sohi, Saki tells Radha the whole village knows about her secret meetings with Krishna. On the Ojia lines translated as, "Why were you sitting in Krishna's shadow?" the choreographer creates a context and narrative progression the song does not indicate at all. Thus, the many Sancharis on these lines show the rise of Radha's love and desire according to the choreographer. Let me show you what happened on "Why Were You Sitting in Krishna's Shadow?" So Radha is bathing in the river. And she sees Krishna's reflection in the water. Overwhelmed, she wants to catch him, but it's only water. And she spots him watching her from a high branch. But she's naked. And she reproaches him for his presence. But the lines never change. In the item Basimo Hoila Pula Seja, the choreographer portrays Radha as the sad and humiliated lover. Krishna has not come to meet her in the grove she had so eagerly decorated with fresh flowers. Aruna Mohanty says, when I choreograph a song like this, in my mind, I arrange it like a film, sequence after sequence, with flashbacks and mise en abîme. I also use Sancharis to show Radha's normal feelings and what is the state of affairs in her subconscious. Throughout the work, there are 5 occurrences of the lines Basimo Hoila Pula Seja, Sajani Aja, Basimo Hoila Pula Seja. These words are Radha's words to Saki. Aruna Mohanty translated them as, "Saki, today my bed of flowers has wilted away." And she explained, the meaning is that Radha thinks today is wasted because Krishna has not come to her. To the choreographer, the flowers are a metaphor of Radha's utter despair. Therefore, these lines in the item alternate with episodes demonstrating how the heroine has reached this state, each repetition a crescendo to Radha's misery. During the 4-minute-long musical introduction, Radha decorates the grove, she waits, and she realizes the night has passed. So what happens? She picks up a small wilted flower, which is now as useless as her love to Krishna is, and she presses it to her heart. Then the song starts, and on Basimo Hoila Pula Seja, she puts the flower back on the ground, and she contemplates it from a distance. She is dissociating. On Sajani Aja, she cries on Saki's shoulder, and on Basimo again, she touches the wilted flowers very lightly, with a lot of compassion, but she does not fully understand that she's suffering just as the flowers are. And then, on Basimo Hoila Pula Seja again, she shows the flowers in many different ways. hurting herself in a ruminative process. The next occurrence of the lines comes after a very long flashback depicting how Radha got ready for her lover, putting on beautiful ornament. So like a necklace, a nose ring, bracelets. So it's a very joyful moment. But now, on the Sancaris, it is an emotional rupture, and Radha feels anger. She kicks the flowers out of her sight because they bear witness to her humiliation. And then, on the next repetition, she sees all the wilted flowers on the ground, and she experiences pure desolation. But she still has a last moment of hope when she seems to glimpse Krishna coming from the forest. He's not coming. This hallucination shatters her faith, and the last Basimo Sancari is the climax of her despair. She pushes away the flowers, and eventually she let them fall in the river, which carries them and her hopes away. We play Basimo. Number 2, Basimo Huila Pula Seja. Radha can be seen as the embodiment of Odissi itself, since both are tightly linked to the sentiment of love and eroticism. The item Kohibakulajo by Oruna Mohanty contains in its first lines the very paradox at the heart of how eroticism is expressed on stage. These lines translate as, "I am really embarrassed to tell you, Saki, what happened today." Here, telling a friend she cannot speak because what she has to say is too embarrassing, Radha echoes the composition mechanisms in the item. In fact, the sung text gestures towards eroticism, but it is the choreography that delivers it. On the first Sancari, on the lyrics Kohibakulajo, Radha is torn between shyness and the urge to tell what happened with Krishna. So she alternately turns away from a friend. She hides her face, but she also grabs Saki's wrist when she seems to go away, promising to tell her everything. But she's shy again. But despite shyness, Radha is strongly agentive in this item. The next lines are, "I did not know Krishna was sleeping, so I sat down to play my veena." The veena is a musical instrument with strings. The choreography describes how she intentionally wakes up and calls her lover with her music, leading him to kiss her. The first part of the following stanza is central in the item, and it shows a crescendo both in the nature of Krishna's kisses and in Radha's reaction to them, as the song merely goes as, "My beloved came and kissed me on my cheek." In the choreography, Krishna pretends to be engrossed in the music, but he understands Radha's call, and in mock suddenness, he grabs Radha's waist, and he softly kisses her cheek. On the Sancari, the same kiss is depicted, but from Radha's point of view. And she pushes Krishna away. And on the next repetition, Radha pictures two kisses, 1 and 2, but this time she confesses her honest reaction to them, her inviting Krishna to go further. The second part of the stanza, in Odia, Moranu Bohigala Sei Samaya, can translate as, and that moment was surreal. But Moranu actually evokes death, and Bohigala something that is above. So, the Sancharis emphasize the transcendental effects of the kisses on Radha's body. And indeed, she shows the shivers up her arms and all over her body, and down to her center. I'm to perform track number 3. The word kiss, chumbile, is nonetheless used in another repeated stanza. He kissed me all over my body, and the feeling was so beautiful, I kept getting goosebumps throughout. Here, the song is more daring, but it leaves the details to the listener's imagination, which is not the case of the choreography. The choreographer has decided on the exact spots where the kisses were given. And Radha shows her ankle, wrist, neck, and lips. The Sancharis even allow a rather risque moment. So Radha is sitting on the ground, and Krishna is kissing her. And this uplifted leg here is actually Krishna's body leaning over Radha. So my body is actually two bodies at that moment. And remarkably, this moment is performed in between the repeated lines, like I think a silent Sanchari or an echo. The choreography shows the unspeakable. Radha and Krishna unite not only their lips, but also their bodies. And it is confirmed in the following lines. He held me close to him so tightly that I couldn't find a way to escape. On the various Sancharis, being held close can be Krishna playfully embracing Radha, or actually holding her tight. But it can also be an echo to the previous stanza with the united bodies. As a matter of fact, by the end of the item, the very solid and grounded choka position is used twice. So what is a choka? That's the square position of Odissi, very grounded. So it is used once to picture Radha as she pretends to escape Krishna. The second time, when she's actually sitting on Krishna and they are kissing. Here again, my legs are Krishna's legs, and my hands are Krishna's hands, but my back and my head are Radha's. So these last moments, performed in this very rooted choker position, establish eroticism as the stable sentiment of the item.
চুম্বিলে অঙ্গ সীমা জাত পুলক রমা শীতকার উপজিলা বারম্বার চুম্বিলে অঙ্গ সীমা চুম্বিলে অঙ্গ সীমা জাত পুলক রমা শীতকার উপজিলা বারম্বার নিবিড় ভুজ বন্ধু ছাড়ি ন দেলে বন্ধু 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 নিবিড় ভুজ বন্ধু ছাড়ি ন দেলে বন্ধু
Thank you so much.
Karine, thank you very much. That's wonderful. Let's have our 5 minutes to talk and then we'll reassemble. Hippolyte, hello. How are you? Can you hear me, Hippolyte?
Yes.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
Great,
I
great.
can.
So, I gather you can't see us. Is that right?
No, I can't.
Okay. It's Richard here, and I'm chairing the session. Thank you very much for your presentation. Thoroughly enjoyable. And we're just having a discussion for another 30 seconds or so, and then we have until 10 past the hour to ask questions. Karine is here too, and has done a lecture recital of dance, Odissi dance. From
Oh, yeah. I watched it on YouTube.
Great.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Should we just round up our discussions? And there is, the roving mic is here. Who would like to ask the first? Karine, would you like to come and join us? And we have about 13 minutes of questions, I reckon, before tea.
For Karine, if that's okay. I'd love to know more about the facial expressions and how much of a role they play in the telling of the story.
Yes. Karine, can I just... Because Hippolyte can't see us, if you could just say who you are before you speak, before you ask a question, that would help, I think.
Louisa Morgan.
Thank you.
So to comment on that, in all the dance theatre of India, like they're called dance theatre for a reason, they're all, like the theatrical part is an essential part of them. And what you have noticed on my face, that's called abhinaya. So that's an entire technique, and we have to learn it very precisely so that it looks natural. It's not natural at all. So yes, it's an important part of the repertoire. On the other hand, we have an entire section of this repertoire, which is called like the Pallavis items, and they are supposed to be pure dance. Such a thing doesn't exist, but it's abstract in the sense that there is no story, no description, just pure, beautiful movement. But what I have performed today are Abhinaya's items, all of them. Welcome.
Jacques Dupuis. To build on that, we were wondering about when this is performed, is all of this staging coming through the choreography and the facial expressions, or is there costuming, or are there sets, or that sort of thing?
Okay, so the dance itself has to be self-sufficient to convey all the emotions. So basically I can perform wearing even like just a sari, or like the clothes are not important. But it is true that in more complex compositions, especially for group compositions, the choreographer uses props and a lot of lighting, so it's like mega productions. They call that mega productions. So yes, and the costume is indeed more elaborate. It is made of silk with silver jewels, like much more than I have right now. So yes, it depends on the situation, but as a soloist, it won't make sense to have so many props. It will distract you from the story and whatever I want to say. My personal taste goes to this very minimalistic kind of presentations, because you can feel the poetry in the body of the artist, and that's what we want to convey.
Thank you. Ivan Hewitt. You mentioned the 8 permanent emotions. I think they're called rasas. Is that right? And I wondered if you could maybe just name them, you know, and say how they're divided between light and dark, if they are divided that way.
Divided between?
Dark and light.
It's not like that. Okay, so first of all, they are listed in the Natya Shastra, 7 of them, and then in the commentary of the Natya Shastra by Abhinava Gupta. So one more, 8 rasas. So first of all, the rasas are what this, like I said, but what the experience, it's an experience actually. So that's what you have to feel when I dance. So we have love, fear, wonder, laughter, Rudra is anger, Shanta, which is the peace, but this one is the extra one. Shanta, I'm lost. Fear, laughter, I'm lost right now, but like the very basic emotions. Did I say wonder? Wonder, laughter.
I think I read somewhere that disgust is one of them.
Disgust, yeah, you're correct, absolutely correct. Yes, but the trick is they are very rarely used as a single emotion. For example, what I pictured today is Sringara Rasa, love and eroticism. But you like in Basimo Hoila Pula Seja, I was the sad lover. So like the emotions are mixed also. It's never one emotion. And on the other one, when she's like very joyful, it's mixed with joy. And also in other items, Radha is very angry at Krishna, but she still loves him. So how do you picture that? Because the love has to be conveyed too with the anger. So it's quite complicated, but it works. Yeah, basically we mix everything. There is an example of one item which is called the 8 rasas, and the choreography depicts each rasa one after another. And how to do that? Generally, we take episodes from the Ramayana, with Rama trying to rescue Sita from the demon Ravana. And we take these episodes and we picture one emotion at a time. My opinion is that it's not possible to do so. So there is another option. On this theme, there is an item with only music. And then we go for one emotion to another, which is maybe a bit easier, because when there is a story, we deal with human beings or divinities, but still it's like versions of humanity. So it has to be complex all the time. So the trick is we have to be able to measure things. And it comes through experience.
Thank you.
In the blue shirt, because you had your hand up for a little while, and is this a question for Hippolyte or Karine?
Oh, it was for Karine.
That's
actually.
fine, but after that, great. Lovely.
Right. Well, thank you very much for the presentation. It was super interesting. Forgive my ignorance. I don't know so much about classical Indian dance theater. But you mentioned that it was from a sort of tradition. And do you know, maybe you could speak more about like the practice? Is it transmitted through sources, through oral tradition, or through... Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Actually, it's a bit controversial, because all the classical dance of India have been stabilized or elaborated after the independence of India. So it's a reaction to colonization, right? So dance existed before in India, because the Natya Shastra was written centuries ago, and so of course. But we have no evidence that what we are performing today are these ancient things that they did before. How, like, we have the statues, the sculptures, but we can't see the movements, we can't listen to the music back then. So it has to be a reconstruction, that's not my opinion, or an elaboration. So we, like the choreographers, do use the texts, the Natya Shastra, the Abhinaya Darpana, like all these ancient treatises with so many lists of movements and gestures and rhythms. Like they have a passion for lists in India, so you will find all your material there. And also from the sculptures. One technique is to go to the temples and to try to, for example, you spot 2 statues, 2 different ones, and both are musicians, right? And you try to connect them. How do you go from one position to another? And there, in this space, that's the difference between the different dances of India. Why is Bharatanatyam not Odissi? Why is it not Kathak? So, so that's the highbrow kind of influence. But to be honest, in Odissi there is a lot of local influence. That is also a bit hidden, or sometimes not, because people want to discuss about that now that Odissi is well established, but not back in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, when it has to be strongly grounded in the artistic landscape. But still, you can feel Odissi is very curvy. We have this insistence on the curves, like one of the main positions is the tribangi, this one. So I'm an S, basically. And in Odissi, what we do, and they don't do too much in other dances, are this movement, like with the torso and the head going one way or another. So, yes, and that's very typical of Odissi, and it's nowhere in the texts or in the statues. You can't tell. Like, you can see the tribangi position, but it's fixed. And in Bharatanatyam, they have this tribangi posture, but they don't move like that. So the influence has to be local. Also, the gurus, the first gurus of Odissi in the 1950s were all artists. Either Gotipwa dancers, like the small mini dancers, like they are dressed as women, but they are also dancers and acrobats, and they do pyramids of themselves. And so that's it. And the gurus came also from the theater environment, and in India, theater does not mean pure theater. It has to be with dance also. So it's a mix of something traditional, something oral, and something written.
Sorry, if I have for my follow-up question. I mean, to me, it sounds like there are a lot of parallels with, what the early music project in Europe is trying to do. And are there like debates about authenticity and these sorts of issues as well, like what we find in historically informed performance practice?
Yeah.
Right. My name is Fatima Wolkowiski, and Hippolyte, I really, really enjoyed your presentation. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can.
Excellent. So I also work with early recordings, but on the singing aspect. And I was wondering about if you work with people that are alive, and so how you make this relevant to them. We were speaking now around the room, and we were wondering, does this type of vocality that you hear in Bernhardt still maintain itself on stage today? To my mind, the only time I've heard it is Offenbach, that, and there's certain parts that are spoken, this kind of, and it sounds very extreme to me. But then you also mentioned, there are certain aspects of her singing or speaking that are to be maintained today. So I wonder, so it's, I guess, a two-pronged question that I'm sure you have a lot to say about.
What I would answer is that I suppose there are two things, because there is the frame of listening. When I use it for contemporary students, I use it as a frame of listening, because what I want to transmit as a voice teacher is as much the vocal technique, but also what it means to listen as a voice person, what it means to listen between the director and the actor. This relational state, this in-betweenness, I think it's very important for actors to hear it during their training, so that they understand a little bit how it works. So I use these historical documents for that, but I also use them because of the craft they carry, because I would say that what I find most in contemporary theater, where you have to use particularly this engagement of the diaphragmatic area, and to be able to compose with the weight of the syllables in French, and almost what I would call the touchy, the haptic quality of the syllables. That's something you're gonna find in theater that is much more related to the Artaud tradition. People that are going to play with distortion of the syntax, distortion of the language, and at the end of the day, I think that the technique that we find in Bernhardt and that we find as an imprint, as a remain in Marie Marquet, is typically something we would see in a production. In France, you have this director, Marie-Josée Malice, who sometimes work like that. You will find it in a style that is like very different than the declamatory style, but still the elements are here.
Amazing. You'll hear from me on on an email. Thank you.
Oh yeah, of course, with pleasure.
One more question?
All right, thank
Yeah.
you. I'm Laila Neumann. I have a question for Hippolyte as well. I was wondering about the channeling not only of the voice that Marie Marquet does, but also of her physical, let's say, language or whatever it is that happens when she is channeling Phèdre or Bernhardt. Did she speak about this?
She doesn't really speak about it from what I know, because I suppose she's from a generation when the sensitivity to the theater goes more through sound than through body descriptions. But what I would say is that Marie Marquet, when she talks about the sillage, I think we can really see in this video the bodily transformation. In the first one, she goes straight away into imitation, so she tries to stick, and we can see like the differences between what she tries to the original model and what she does. But the second one, there is much more space for transformation, and you see that Marie Marquet, she tends to have like a lot of chest resonance. She's much more like in this type of voice, and not so much into the nasality of Bernhardt. But she still physically try to find a sense of lightness, a sense of getting towards the ceiling when she does the transformation with the Songe Fatali. So there is an impact, but yeah, I don't think she necessarily talk about it so much.
Interesting.
But it's the paradox, isn't it? Like Marie Marquet. In a way, the way I analyze Marie Marquet is a little bit as if I was the voice coach of Marie Marquet. She never asked me to, because she died too early, and she wouldn't have liked it, I'm sure. But I'm doing as if I was the voice coach, and I was interrogating how technically and dramaturgically her desire to imitate or to be in the wake of Sarah Bernhardt is. This is a bit my position. So all the description I give you are really the description I would give when I practice with a contemporary actor.
Thank you.
I think that's a lovely place to stop. Hippolyte, thank you very much for joining us from wherever you are. Because you haven't been here for the last couple of days, it's built beautifully on other things that we've had in the last couple of days. So that's wonderful. And Karine, thank you so much for your lecture recital. It's wonderful.
Oh, thank you very much.
And we'll be back in 30 minutes. Thank you.